and we'll just try and get a few through some of them. This is starting with the big picture. This is basically showing you how many people are coming into the country, that's immigration, and how many people are going out. And we've got it going back to 2012 here. And when people talk about net migration, what do they mean? They basically mean they take that bit away from that bit. So a number of people leaving away from the number of people coming in, and you get a net figure. It's usually positive, or at least it's positive.
Starmer's migrant crisis, when deterrence meets reality. Good morning, and welcome back to UK Connors, where we dissect the political machinations that shape our nation. If you're new here, do hit that subscribe button now, because what I'm about to tell you will fundamentally change how you view Labour's immigration strategy, and frankly, you won't want to miss our deep dives into the stories that matter. Right then, let's get straight to it. Picture this. Sir Keir Starmer, the man who promised to bring order and competence back to British governance, watching helplessly as his carefully constructed narrative crumbles in real time. Friday the 13th, and what an unlucky day it proved to be for the Prime Minister. Over 1,000 migrants crossed the English Channel in small boats in a single day. 1,072 souls, to be precise, packed into 13 makeshift vessels, adding to what has already become the most damning statistic of Starmer's tenure, 32,103 channel crossings in 2025 alone. That's not just a number. That's a political catastrophe brewing in broad daylight. But here's where it gets deliciously ironic. While Starmer's government scrambles to project strength and control, the very policy designed to stem this tide is being exposed as little more than political theatre. David Lammy, the Foreign Secretary, stood before cameras with a kind of confidence that only comes from either supreme delusion or masterful spin, declaring their returns agreement with France an immediate deterrent. Immediate deterrent? With respect to Mr. Lammy, the only thing that's immediate here is the growing queue of boats on French beaches. Let me paint you the reality behind the rhetoric. Free deportations. Free. An Iranian man on Friday, joining an Eritrean gentleman who'd failed to secure a high court injunction, and an Indian national the day before. 3 people, while over 1,000 arrived in the opposite direction. It's rather like claiming victory in the Battle of Hastings while your army retreats toward Dover, isn't it? The mathematics alone should embarrass any serious politician, yet there was Lammy, chest puffed out, proclaiming a 14% increase in returns as if it weren't completely dwarfed by the tsunami of arrivals. The most telling moment came when a human trafficker, yes, you heard that correctly, one of the very criminals this government claims to be targeting, helpfully explained the scale of the challenge to BBC Radio 4. This unnamed individual, speaking with the casual authority of someone who understands supply and demand far better than our Home Office, revealed that stopping small boat crossings would require deporting at least 2,000 people per week. 2,000 per week. And even then, he cheerfully noted, we could send 2,000 a day. There's something almost Shakespearean about a criminal kingpin offering free strategic advice to the government he's outsmarting. This isn't merely an administrative failure. It's a fundamental misunderstanding of the forces at play. While Starmer's team celebrates returning 3 individuals to France, the broader machinery of irregular migration continues to operate with industrial efficiency. Every beach in northern France has become a staging post, every calm weather window an opportunity, every successful crossing advertisement for the next journey. The deterrent effect that Labour promised? It's about as effective as a chocolate teapot in August. What makes this particularly galling is a disconnect between official pronouncements and observable reality. Next week, we're told, the first flight will carry asylum seekers from France to the UK under this new agreement. Flights bringing people in, not taking them out. Meanwhile, the government continues to speak of breaking the business model of criminal gangs while providing them with their most profitable year on record. It's rather like announcing you're fighting inflation while simultaneously printing money. The contradictions are so glaring they'd be comical if they weren't so serious. The human cost of this political failure cannot be ignored. Every crossing represents not just a policy shortcoming, but a human tragedy waiting to happen. The English Channel isn't a theme park ride. It's one of the world's busiest shipping lanes, with treacherous currents and unpredictable weather. Yet people continue to risk everything because they perceive the likelihood of success as greater than the risk of failure. And frankly, looking at these numbers, can we blame them for that calculation? What's most damaging for Starmer isn't the immediate political fallout, though that will be considerable. It's the erosion of credibility that comes with promising solutions you cannot deliver. Remember, This is the same man who spent years criticizing conservative immigration policy from the opposition benches. He presented Labour as a competent alternative, the party that would bring order to chaos, control to confusion. Yet here we are, watching his government struggle with exactly the same challenges that bedeviled his predecessors, armed with the same inadequate tools and facing the same inexorable pressures. The strategic error here runs deeper than simple incompetence. Labour's approach betrays a fundamental misreading of both the scale and nature of the challenge. Irregular migration isn't a tap that can be turned off with the right policy adjustment. It's a river that finds its way around every obstacle. Build higher walls, and ladders get longer. Increase deportations marginally, and the flow simply adapts. The only effective deterrents are either making the journey impossible, which geography prevents, or making the destination less attractive, which no mainstream politician will countenance. This brings us to the uncomfortable truth that no one in Westminster wants to acknowledge. Current policy is performative rather than practical. It's designed to look tough rather than be effective, to generate headlines rather than results. The returns agreement with France makes for good optics, cooperative European partnership, targeted enforcement, humane but firm approach. It ticks every box except the one that matters, actually reducing irregular migration. The political implications extend far beyond immigration policy. If Starmer cannot control something as visible and measurable as channel crossings, what confidence can voters have in his government's ability to tackle more complex challenges? Economic growth, housing, healthcare, education, all require sustained competence and strategic thinking. If you can't count votes accurately, can you count on anything else? What's particularly striking is how this crisis exposes the limitations of conventional political wisdom. For years, politicians of all stripes have promised to take control of immigration, as if it was simply a matter of political rather than complex international dynamics. The reality is that migration flows are driven by forces far beyond the reach of domestic policymakers: economic inequality, political instability, climate change, demographic trends. A government that recognizes these constraints might develop more realistic responses, one that doesn't end up promising the impossible and delivering the inadequate. Conservative opposition must be watching these developments with a mixture of schadenfreude and recognition. They face identical challenges and produce similarly disappointing results. The difference is that they weren't elected on promises of competence and control. Starmer's Labour Party explicitly positioned itself as a solution to conservative chaos, the grown-ups returning to clean up the mess. That narrative becomes harder to sustain when your own mess is displayed so prominently across the Dover Strait. European dimensions add another layer of complexity. While Britain congratulates itself on bilateral cooperation with France, the broader European migration system continues to struggle with similar pressures. Italy, Greece, Spain, and Germany all face their own versions of this challenge. Britain's attempt to solve its migration issues in isolation, whether through offshore processing, increased deportations, or enhanced cooperation agreements, missed the fundamental point that this is a European problem requiring European solutions. But post-Brexit Britain has limited influence in European councils and even less appetite for the kind of burden-sharing arrangements that might make a difference. The economic implications deserve attention too. Every pound spent on enforcement, detention, and deportation is a pound not invested in processing legitimate asylum claims efficiently. The current system creates perverse incentives, lengthy delays, inadequate accommodation, restricted work rights that actually increase both the human cost and the financial burden. A rational approach might prioritize rapid processing, swift integration for those granted status, and humane but prompt return for those refused. Instead, we have a system that maximizes costs while minimizing effectiveness. Looking ahead, several scenarios present themselves, none particularly appetizing for the government. If crossings continue at current levels, political pressure will intensify, demanding even tougher measures that may prove equally ineffective. If they decrease temporarily due to seasonal factors, the government will claim credit for policies that had little impact, only to face renewed criticism when numbers rise again. If they increase further, the entire narrative of control and competence collapses completely. The media dimension cannot be ignored either. Every crossing provides content for 24-hour news cycles hungry for dramatic visuals and political controversy. Opposition parties, pressure groups, and commentators all have incentives to keep this story prominent. In such an environment, rational policymaking becomes nearly impossible, replaced by reactive gestures designed more for headlines and effectiveness. The result is a perpetual cycle of promise, disappointment, recrimination, and renewed promises. International cooperation faces similar challenges. France has its own domestic political pressures around migration, and cooperation with Britain provides both opportunities and risks. Too much cooperation risks accusations of subservience to British demands. Too little invites criticism of ineffectiveness. The result is carefully calibrated gestures, 3 deportations here, a new agreement there, that provide political cover without substantially altering underlying dynamics. What emerges from all this is a picture of a government trapped by its own rhetoric, unable to acknowledge the limitations of its approach without undermining its broader political positioning. Admitting that irregular migration cannot be stopped completely would be politically damaging but intellectually honest. Continuing to promise what cannot be delivered compounds the damage while solving nothing. It's a classic political bind, made worse by the visibility of the issue and the ease with which results can be measured. The human trafficker's casual dismissal of government policy, suggesting that even 2,000 deportations daily wouldn't stop the flow, reveals the scale of the challenge more clearly than any government briefing. These are people who understand market forces, risk assessment, and operational logistics far better than civil servants drafting policy papers in Whitehall. They adapt quickly, learn from setbacks, and maintain focus on their core objective, moving people across borders regardless of official policy. Governments, by contrast, move slowly, learn reluctantly, and often confuse activity with achievement. As we watch this crisis unfold, it's worth remembering that every political failure has consequences beyond Westminster point scoring. People die in the Channel. Communities struggle with integration challenges. Public trust in institutions erodes. The rule of law faces pressure when policies cannot be enforced effectively. Democratic legitimacy suffers when governments promise what they cannot deliver. These aren't abstract political problems. They're real challenges affecting real people in real time. The path forward requires honest acknowledgement of limitations, realistic goal setting, and sustained commitment to solutions that might take years to bear fruit. It means recognizing that irregular migration is a symptom of broader global inequalities and instabilities that cannot be solved at the border. It means investing in legal migration routes, efficient processing systems, and genuine international cooperation rather than performative gestures. Most importantly, it means politicians having adult conversations with voters about what is and isn't possible, rather than competing to make the most unrealistic promises. But can Sir Keir Starmer make that transition from opposition rhetoric to governing reality? Can he acknowledge that his criticisms of conservative policy were easier to make than solutions are to implement? The evidence so far suggests otherwise. The same politicians who promised to smash the gangs are learning that the gangs don't break easily. The same voices that demanded control are discovering that control requires more than political will. The same leaders who pledge competence are finding that competence without capability achieves little. What we're witnessing isn't just policy failure. It's a collision between political aspiration and operational reality, between campaign promises and governing constraints, between what sounds good in opposition and what works in power. Starmer's migrant crisis reveals these tensions more clearly than perhaps any other issue, because the results are so visible, so measurable, and so immediate. The question isn't whether this government will solve irregular migration. It won't. The question is whether it will learn from its failures, adjust its approach, and level with voters about the challenges involved. On current evidence, the answer appears to be no. Instead, we're likely to see more of the same: inflated rhetoric, marginal adjustments, and mounting disappointment. The boats will keep coming, the numbers will keep rising, and the credibility will keep falling. And that, rather than any single policy failure, may prove to be Sir Keir Starmer's lasting legacy on this issue. Not that he couldn't stop the boats, no one expected him to achieve the impossible, but that he promised he could, maintained that pretense long after evidence suggested otherwise, and chose political positioning over honest governance. In the end, that may prove the most damaging failure of all. That's our analysis for today. The numbers don't lie. The boats keep coming, and the government keeps pretending otherwise. We'll continue following this story as it develops, because frankly, it's not going anywhere soon. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss our next deep dive into the political stories that actually matter. Until next time, This has been UK Connors, keeping you informed while others keep you entertained.